5 years ago, my wife and I moved into a new home in a West Irish housing estate. The house is nice and modern, and we like the way it was designed overall. However, shortly after we moved in, I started to feel uneasy for reasons I can't explain, but it was strong enough to notice that the attic wasn't what you'd expect it to be because it was completely converted into a bedroom and bathroom. When the house was built, there was a proper staircase leading up to it rather than a ladder, and it even had a dormer window that let in a lot of light. The space is large and doesn't feel claustrophobic, but there was something about that closet area that didn't feel right. The attic contains the closet. Situated in the center of the house, it is encircled by other areas, such as the restroom. When I used to sit in my office, I would occasionally feel something lightly touch my hair on my right side, like someone flicking a single hair. After a few months of experiencing this touch, I thought moving my desk to the other side of the room might help, but now I feel it on my left side instead of in a straight line from where the closet is behind me. I also landed my office in a crawl space, which has no windows. No matter how much I try to ignore it, it always appears in the same place. There are no heaters or windows on that side of the room, and there is nothing else that could be the cause. It's not just the touch though. Sometimes I hear what sounds like talking. It's hard to describe, like 3 different conversations happening at once layered over each other. The voices are soft like whispers, and they don't make any sense. It only lasts for a second or two, just long enough for me to notice, and then it's gone. The strangest part is that it always stops the moment I turn around, as if whatever it is doesn't want to be caught. I tried to ignore all of this until one night my wife told me she felt like someone was watching her from our bedroom walk-in closet. That closet is right below the attic closet, just like the attic one. It's surrounded by other rooms and doesn't have any windows. She also said she can't sleep with her back facing it because it makes her uneasy. Then one night, when I was going to bed, I usually stay up later than my wife because I work from home. As I was heading to the bedroom, I noticed a shadow, or more like a dark void, as if light was missing on the landing outside the bedroom. I actually walked past it, but something made me turn around to take another look. That's when it stood up, almost as if it was rising, and rushed toward me. In one quick motion, it swooped over me and disappeared. The whole thing happened so fast that I instinctively stepped back, like I was trying to protect myself. By now, my wife and I had been discussing the strange things happening in the house, and when I told her what had happened, she seemed uneasy. Then, one night, she woke up and saw something standing at the foot of the bed. She couldn't tell what it was, but it was dark and shadowy. She sat up to get a better look, and it moved suddenly, rushed toward her, went upward, and disappeared. Her story made me feel even more uneasy because it sounded exactly like what I had just gone through. Other strange things have been happening too. Sometimes when we're downstairs, we hear the sound of our bedroom shutters opening. It's a very clear sound, the magnet releasing the shutters folding and hitting the wall. But when I go upstairs to check, the shutters are closed and everything looks normal. Another odd thing is the tiny holes in our shirts. It started with my wife's shirts. They would get 3 small perfect holes near the bottom, slightly to the left of the center. The holes weren't ripped or torn, they were neat tiny circles in the shape of a triangle. Now it's happening to my shirts too, and we can't figure out why. The holes always show up in the exact same pattern, 3 tiny perfect circles in a triangle shape. At first I thought maybe my wife was catching her shirts on something at work, or maybe it was her car seat belt or the washing machine causing it, but after about 6 months it started happening to my shirts. And t-shirts too, in the same spot. We've switched cars multiple times. since then, so it's not the seatbelt. We don't wear the same seatbelt either, so that's not the problem. I've even checked the kitchen counter thinking maybe something there could be causing the holes while we're cooking or washing dishes, but I couldn't find anything unusual. Also, my wife sometimes gets bruises on her legs and arms that we can't explain. It's not just in the morning. Sometimes she'll notice a big bruise forming while we're sitting and watching TV. It wasn't there just an hour before. A few nights ago, I saw something again. It was like a ball of darkness in the corner of the room, but it was only visible when I didn't look directly at it. It's hard to explain, but it definitely felt strange. It used to happen mostly in the center column of the house where the attic, closet, and other rooms are, but now it's happening on my side of the room, which is something new. This side of the room had always felt normal, but lately the strange things have been happening here too. We're not sure if we should do something about it because we're worried that it might make things worse. It doesn't feel evil, but it's definitely weird, and we don't know what to make of it. I feel like I have a special ability because I dream about things that happen in real life. For example, a few days ago, I had a nightmare in which someone was trapped in a car and screaming for help. It felt so real that I woke up feeling uneasy. The following night, at around 11 o'clock, my mom answered the phone, and even without saying anything, I could tell something was wrong by the look on her face. I got dressed and walked over to her. As she hung up, I asked, "Was that your friend?" She nodded and explained that her best friend had called. Her friend's daughter, who was one of my friends from high school, was in trouble. I said my friend was in a car accident on her way home from work, wasn't she? My mom looked shocked because that's exactly what the phone call was about. My friend's car had flipped over and she was trapped inside. Just to clarify, she's fine now. So my house was built in 1901 and it was one of the first houses to have electricity and lights, and since we moved into the house a year ago, we've noticed many weird things happening. For example, we have a spiritual friend who absolutely refuses to go to the third floor. That's where we found an old death certificate belonging to the man who first owned the house. He passed away in this house, though as far as we know, no one else has died here. Now, back in May, our cat started acting very strange. She would stare at empty corners of the room, her fur standing on end, and hiss at nothing we could see. At night, she would pace around restlessly and hide under furniture, something she never used to do before. In July, I was sitting on the sofa with my cat asleep in my lap. Then suddenly I heard the sound of someone sitting on the couch next to me. I watched as the cushion sank like someone invisible had just sat down. The cat woke up right away and started growling softly, but it sounded threatening. Her fur stood up and she kept staring at the spot on the couch. Then the cushions slowly went back to normal, as if whatever had been sitting there had stood up and walked away. Then last month, I had a recurring nightmare that felt so real it stayed with me even after waking up. In the dream, I woke up in bed and saw a little girl standing over me. She looked about 4 or 5 years old, wearing a black dress that seemed old-fashioned, and her long black hair hung over her pale face. Her skin was a sickly grayish-blue, like someone who hadn't been alive for a long time. Her empty, cold eyes stared straight at me, and I couldn't move or speak. It felt like she was trying to tell me something, but I woke up before anything else happened. After having the same nightmare 4 times, I got up and went to sit in our reading room. I sat in a chair near the bottom of the stairs trying to calm down. Then suddenly I started hearing dripping sounds coming from the landing on the stairs. I looked up and saw her standing there staring at me with cold, empty eyes. I froze for a moment, too scared to move. Then I quickly glanced at my phone and turned on the flashlight light, but by the time I looked back, she was gone. Now let me tell you about last night. I had fallen asleep upstairs in the living room, sitting in an old chair that was already here when we moved in. The room was quiet, but I kept hearing a woman's voice, soft and sweet. Heard it maybe 5 or 6 times, each time closer than before. When I suddenly woke up, my ears were ringing loudly like the voice had echoed inside my head. The lights above me were flickering on and off. The ringing in my ears was so loud that I couldn't hear anything for about 30 seconds. Then it suddenly stopped. I went downstairs to bed, but I still couldn't shake the feeling, so I stayed awake and played on my phone next to my boyfriend. He suddenly sat up in bed looking around like he was scared. He was breathing heavily like he was panicking. About 15 minutes after that, he did the same thing again. The strange part is he doesn't remember any of it. About an hour later, I went back to our reading room. The cat went up the 3 stairs to the landing and just stared at the top of the stairs. I tried to get her attention, but she wouldn't stop staring. Then she did it again. I can't stand this ghost's low, menacing growl any longer. I need to regain control of my house and restore tranquility. I need to stop living in constant fear. I need to get some of these stories off of my chest, especially after what happened 2 weeks ago. Now, I've always believed my parents' house was haunted since I had spent my childhood in that house. I was born and raised there, and between the ages of 4 and 6 I saw things I still can't explain. Unfortunately, my parents experienced them too, but this story isn't about that. We moved to a new house when I was sick, and my parents thought there wouldn't be anything strange in this one, but I always felt uneasy. There was one room we called the orange room because it had bright orange carpet. When we moved in, it was a small room in the middle of the house, like a second living room, but it was connected to the main living room, so you had to go through it to get anywhere in the house, and I didn't like it. I mean, something about the room felt weird. For the first few years, nothing unusual happened. The nightmares I used to have in our old house had stopped, so I started to think this house might be fine until one night our new house was built where old train tracks used to be. The tracks were removed and replaced with a road, but some of the wood from the tracks was used to build the houses. I was about 9 years old when I first heard a train whistle. I was sitting in the orange room playing with Legos. I looked out the big windows and didn't see anything. The area was quiet and there hadn't been trains running anywhere near us for at least 50 miles. I asked my mom about it and she said it was probably a truck horn, but I loved trains back then and knew the difference between a train whistle and a truck horn. I tried to forget about it and told myself it was just my imagination. Then one night something happened that she couldn't explain. I was 12 at the time and already knew about the strange things she had seen or heard, like the shadow of a cat running behind a chair, pictures falling off a table, or a Christmas bell ringing when she was home alone. The clock in the living room was heavy and hung above the fireplace. Below the clock was the mantel where my mom kept picture frames with photo of me, my sister, and my cousins. It was fall, so there were also some Halloween decorations there. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but we were all fast asleep. My mom suddenly heard a loud crashing sound from the living room and she got scared. She woke up my dad and told him to go check, but he was really tired. She pulled him out of bed and they both went to the living room. What they saw, neither of them could explain. The clock had fallen off the fireplace. It should have just fallen straight down onto the mantel, right? But no, it didn't even touch the. A few more years went by before the next strange thing happened. It was winter and I was about 16 years old. I used to play games late into the night on the weekends, and it was around 2:30 a.m. when I finally started turning everything off to go to bed. I would check the big bay window by the orange room to make sure the outside lights were off, but something was staring back at me. That night, when I looked outside, I saw that the lights were off, but something was staring back at me. I frantically ran to my parents' room, waking them up and telling them that I saw what appeared to be a man with a very long face staring at me through the window. My dad grabbed a metal bar and went to check the living room, but there was nothing there, no footprints, no tracks in the snow, and nothing else. I knew what I saw was definitely a face. Other strange things also started happening, like a tan figure appearing in the background of one of my Snapchat photos. Another time, I took a selfie in the orange room, and it came out distorted, with my eyes blacked out. I was standing in that room again, but nothing strange happened again until 2 weeks ago, while we were decorating for Christmas and I was moving ornaments from one tree to another. I heard the familiar sound of my mom's Charlie Brown snow globe playing music. I quickly turned my head and froze, watching as the snow globe suddenly stopped. I was unable to breathe. My mom came into the orange room and saw me, and she later claimed that I was standing there, looking as pale as a ghost. She asked if I had turned the dial on the snow globe, and I told her no, and straightened up. When I asked my mom when she put the snow globe on the shelf, I thought maybe it was still moving from when she put it there. She said she put it there 5 hours earlier, right after I woke up, so it couldn't have been leftover movement. I don't want to go back into that room because I feel so uneasy when I'm in there. I explained that I was just passing by and showed her the ornaments I was holding. I also told her that I couldn't turn the dial because it's on the bottom of the snow globe and requires both hands to turn because it's old and difficult to spin. Christmas is approaching, and while I know I must, I really don't want to. It's difficult, but I'm anxious about what could occur the next time I visit. I purchased my home in January 2023, and at first nothing out of the ordinary occurred. However, after giving birth and bringing my kid home in July 2023, things began to seem different. One morning during my maternity leave, my baby woke up early and began wailing for a bottle. The house was silent except for my baby's screams, so I got out of bed and went to the kitchen to prepare it myself. As I was getting the bottle ready, I heard a deep man's voice speak a single, clear word. He was lying there, staring off into space like babies often do, but he seemed really happy, which was a big change from how he'd been crying just a moment ago. I think that moment was the beginning of what we now call the ghost man in our house, but I don't get scared easily because I grew up in a house with strange happenings, so I've been around unexpected things for as long as I can remember. I even stayed at my neighbor's house after high school, which was also haunted, so I'm kind of used to it by now. However, my fiancé is completely different. One night, while he was in the kitchen feeding our dogs, the Graco swing that moves back and forth to help them relax suddenly turned on by itself and started moving. We hadn't even touched it, so I was certain it had been turned off completely. Another odd thing happened with my fiancé. We had purchased a motion-sensing baby monitor for the nursery, which was meant to notify us of any movement in the baby's room. At that time, our baby was still sleeping in a crib in our bedroom, so we hadn't set it up yet. Or even plugged it in, even though it wasn't being used. Moments like these were starting to happen more often, especially when my fiancé was around. The camera was set up in the nursery and the monitor was plugged in at my fiancé's desk so we could test how far it worked. Then one day I noticed the monitor was unplugged from the wall. I asked him why, and he said the motion sensor kept turning the screen on even though no one was in the nursery. It scared him, so he unplugged it. We soon realized that ghost man seemed very interested in our baby in the nursery. Then a few weeks later, my fiancé's parents came to visit and stayed in the guest bedroom, which is right next to the nursery. At that time, our baby was still sleeping in our bedroom, so there was no reason for us to use the nursery during the night. Then next morning, we were all sitting on the couch having coffee and chatting. My father-in-law asked how we slept, and I told him we slept fine. Then he said, "Really, I heard you guys going in." and out of the nursery all night. My fiancé and I looked at each other completely confused. Neither of us had gone into the nursery during the night. I was sure of it because the baby was with us the whole time and we didn't need to grab anything from that room. My father-in-law was serious though and said he clearly heard footsteps and the sound of the door opening and closing. I told my father-in-law that it wasn't us, and he looked really serious. He said, "No, I heard one of you walk over to the nursery, open and close the door and rummage around inside. Then I heard someone leave the room, and it happened at least 3 times during the night." We both just stared at him for a moment, but we weren't surprised anymore. Things have calmed down a bit in the last few months, but every once in a while something odd still happens. This occurred about 10 years ago when I was 14 years old. We lived in an old farmhouse on a country road, surrounded by cornfields, and our closest neighbors lived 2 to 3 miles away. One night, my mom and I were the only ones at home, baking treats to sell and raise money for my little brother's Boy Scout group. My dad and brother were out helping my uncle with some cows, if I recall correctly, so we were busy in the kitchen, talking and laughing, when we heard a knock on the door. I felt a little uneasy, but assumed it was just my usual worries. My mom went to the door, and the knock came again, but this time it was a beat: tap, tap, tap. My mom stopped, turned around, and looked pale. She then went back to the kitchen and went to the window that faced the porch. She went to the side where you could see the porch quite well, and she pulled the curtain a little so that no one could see her from outside. After that, she checked the driveway from the opposite side of the window. Making pie crusts didn't seem that vital at this time, so I halted what I was doing. Mom's eyes got big when she looked outside. Then she closed the curtain and stared at the floor. Her face showed both anger and fear. She took my wrist and led us to the closet, asking quietly if I had my cell phone. I did. Then from the closet she took out my dad's special Louisville Slugger baseball bat. Suddenly the person outside banged on the door really loud. I gasped. The little mom looked at me, telling me to be quiet, and took my arm. We went to my parents' bedroom, and she locked the door and windows. As we walked, Mom took my phone and started dialing while handing me the bat. She sat me down on the floor where I'd be out of sight from the door and opened the closet to get the gun case. She spoke quietly on the phone, but I was really scared and couldn't concentrate on what she was saying. She took out my dad's shotgun and loaded it fast. I looked at her, frightened. When she hung up the phone, she pulled me up again and led me out of the bedroom. We sneaked over to the other side of the house, where the bathroom was. I nodded, and she squeezed my shoulders, saying, "I'm going to block the door from the other side, and I won't remove it until I tell you it's safe." Mom handed me my phone and motioned for me to go inside. She put down the gun and looked at me while placing both hands on my shoulders. "You have to listen," she said. "Some guys are outside walking around the side of the house." I stared at her, my eyes wide, feeling shaky. "What do they want?" "I don't know, but you have to stay in here, lock the door, and don't come out until I say I get it." It seemed like a long time, but it was only 5 minutes. I heard her push the heavy quartz chest in front of the door, a box filled with quartz for many years. As I sat there, I heard 2 footsteps outside the window and 2 deep voices talking quietly. Were they really inside? Maybe no one was home, but no, there were at least 2 ladies. Heard them conversing at the door. I was crying a lot by this point, and I heard a man's voice in the house. I panicked and huddled into the bathroom corner when I heard my mom's voice on the other side of the bathroom door saying, "It's me, the sheriff's here. They're gone. I'm moving the trunk." I was terrified and started breathing quickly, but I covered my mouth with a towel to keep it quiet. "Who are these people?" Soon after, I heard another voice. "Guys, let's go." Charlie saw cops down the road. I got up, unlocked the door, and opened it. My mother and the sheriff were relocating the trunk, so I hurried to her arms and we hugged. The sheriff informed me that additional cops were pursuing the van and that he wanted to interrogate my mother and me. My mother gave a nod, and we proceeded to the kitchen, where the scent of burned cookies filled the air. The sheriff questioned us, and that's when I learned what my mother saw when she looked out and saw the man knocking on our door. She immediately realized something was wrong because he was wearing casual clothing, gym shorts and a tank top, not what a salesman or a church representative would wear when they were visiting. My mother assumed that his car had broken down or something, and he needed help, but when she looked out into the driveway, she saw something that alarmed her: a van parked in our driveway, and although both men were still inside, the van was rocking a little, as if there were more people inside. When a deputy entered the room while my mom and I were speaking with the sheriff, he seemed very pale. He turned to face my mom, the sheriff, and me and said, "Sir, we caught up with the van. They lost control and swerved into the ditch. Are any of them hurt?" "No, they're okay, but we have them in custody." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "There were 5 guys in the van. We asked them why they were here and why they were walking around your house, and what did they say?" "They claimed to be vacuum salesmen, sir, a team selling the product they made." The sheriff scoffed a bit. "They took my mom outside and told her what they found. She came back inside crying and holding on to me. After that they called my dad and he rushed home. My other uncle, a really big guy, stayed that night just in case. My mom didn't spare any expense on home security and taught both of us kids how to shoot and load a gun. My aunt and uncle gave us one of their German Shepherd puppies. Mom had to train him to be a guard dog, but he was a goofy and affectionate pup when not on duty. However, even with that, Mom still wasn't reassured. My brother and I ended up going to self-defense lessons to make her feel safer. It wasn't until a few years later, while we were making cookies and homemade candy for a Christmas party, that I finally asked my mom about what was in the van. She was surprised that I asked, but knew I would find out eventually. So what was in the van? They found rope, tape, burlap sacks, and even sedatives. After taking the guys back in hours of questioning, one of them finally broke and admitted they were having no luck catching anyone in town, so they went to rural areas. My mom asked me and my girlfriend a few days before Christmas if we could watch the home and the dogs while she went on a week-long trip with her boyfriend. We said yes, and the first few days went rather well. My girlfriend and I were relaxing on the couch 3 nights after we started staying at my mom's house, which is on the outskirts of a small town in upstate New York. Other than the occasional road construction, not much usually happens there. She was occupied with her phone, and I was engrossed in playing Pokemon Shield on Switch. The clock was ticking and it was around midnight. Suddenly we heard heavy footsteps from outside. It was kind of creepy because someone with really big boots had walked up onto the porch. The layout of my mom's house is interesting. There's a couch against the wall and big windows on both sides of it, so from where we were sitting we could hear and see things happening outside. On the wall opposite to us is the front porch, so this guy was right behind us. He stomped around the porch making heavy sounds. Then he got really close to the window on the left side of the couch and grunted "GH hell" in a deep angry voice. My girlfriend and I were frozen in place trying to understand what just happened. It took about 5 seconds for us to snap out of it. We quickly got up and decided to turn off all the lights in the house. Then we tiptoed to the laundry room, a place where he couldn't see us. After a little while I felt like it might be safe to go to a different room and check if we could turn any lights back on, but When I peeked out of the window, I saw this big burly guy shuffling down the sidewalk opposite our house. It was around midnight in a small town, and it's not the kind of place where things like this happen often. The street was quiet, and the man's footsteps made a sound on the sidewalk. He was holding a plastic bag, and he didn't appear to be in the right mood for the late hour. Keep in mind that it's really late at night in a small town, so there aren't any businesses open for him to acquire one. The guy keeps doing this strange shuffle while holding the bag, then all of a sudden he starts moving really fast in a funny way across the street toward the parking lot near my house, and then he disappears. I go back to the laundry room and told her about what I saw. Then I bring her back to the window where I was looking to see if we can find the guy again, but he's not there. We check other windows in the house to see if he's outside any of those. My girlfriend looks out her window on the other side of the house, and that's when she saw him, but he's walking away. We talk about whether we should call the cops, and then suddenly we hear knocks on the door on the other side of the house. We rush over, and the doorknob is jiggling like someone is trying to open it, but luckily it was locked. Then one of my mom's dogs, a small rescue pup, starts barking like crazy and growling at whatever's on the other side. He has a really loud screechy bark, and I think that scared the person away. We called my mom to ask for advice. Then we thought about calling the cops, but around here the cops aren't known for being super helpful, so we decided against it. My mom also told us not to bother because she thought it might be someone who was drunk or high and didn't know what they were doing. Later I found out it's not the first time someone showed up at our door all messed up in the middle of the night, but I'm not really sure what the guy's intentions were, and I'm really glad I didn't have to find out. I used to live with my ex-boyfriend in a small apartment in Paris. Our relationship was not good. It was full of problems and sometimes violent. Also, I was sick and couldn't go out with my friends, so I spent a lot of time on the internet. I didn't have many friends because most of them left me when I got sick, but one day when I had a big fight with my boyfriend, I felt really sad and lonely. So I decided to chat with random people on a website. That's when I met a guy who shared the same interests as me. We both liked playing video games a lot, and we chatted almost every day for 6 months. His name is Alex, and he knew I was in a bad relationship, even though it was a really tough one. So one weekend we decided to meet in person, and he was okay with coming to my place. At first we were both shy, but with the help of some alcohol we started talking and laughing together. I felt so happy that I finally had a friend to talk to, so after that we met at least once a week, and it was a really good time for me as we had a lot in common, and he never made me go out if I didn't want to. We helped each other out. Alex was dealing with depression and thought he was ruining his own life, so I wanted to help him as much as I could to give him self-esteem. I just wanted him to have a good time with a friend. On my 22nd birthday, my boyfriend decided to have a party and invited Alex. He was the only friend nearby, but my boyfriend also invited 10 of his friends. I wasn't happy about it. My boyfriend knew I didn't like too many people around. It makes me anxious, so I spent the whole night cooking and serving his friends. I couldn't enjoy the party. On top of that, my boyfriend embarrasses me in front of everyone. Alex came over to comfort me as I was really upset. I shared everything about how my boyfriend was treating me badly. I told Alex that I loved my boyfriend, but would break up when it's safer. It was too risky to end things right then. But while I was crying, Alex tried to kiss me. I stopped him because I didn't want more problems in my life. It was already too hard. It might sound strange, but I felt betrayed. It seemed like he was waiting for this moment to try something, but he didn't say anything, just opened the door and gave me a beautiful necklace as a gift. I said I couldn't take the expensive gift, but he left without saying anything. After that, I thought it would be better to keep some space between us. It's not fair to stay friends if you want something more, I told him that if he wanted more it couldn't be with me. Then a few months later he sent me a lot of messages, like 20 of them. He said he was really in love with me, wanted to save me, and that I was his reason to live. On other end, I was working as a waitress taking orders over the phone at a small restaurant where my boyfriend got upset with me because I was getting too many texts and calls from him. I was so nervous that I turned off my phone and went to work. When the phone rang, I heard breathing at first, but then I recognized the voice. It was Alex. I felt like I was in a horror movie. I hung up almost immediately, but it kept ringing like 10 times until my boss answered. It was 7 p.m., and I was supposed to finish work at 11 p.m. I was so terrified that I was unable to speak. So I rushed to the kitchen and informed one of my coworkers what was going on. He took over as the server, and I began working as a cook. After about half an hour, Alex left, and I was too scared to go home alone, so my coworker gave me a ride to my apartment. The following day, I received over 100 blocked calls, and since I was exhausted and didn't sleep at all, I did my best to ignore him. A month later, he made numerous attempts to visit my workplace, but I ignored him in the hopes that he would understand and leave me alone. When he didn't stop, I became frightened and tried to report it to the police, but they were unable to assist. One day, when I woke up to go to work, my boyfriend was playing video games online when he received a message from Alex, saying that he loved me, that I was unfaithful, that we had shared personal moments together several times, and other things. I was shocked and didn't understand what was happening. My brain froze and I couldn't react. Luckily, my boyfriend saw the blocked call. He had suspected Alex was bothering me for a while, even though I never told him, and decided to block Alex too. After that, he went to work. My boss called and said I could start 2 hours later today. It's mean I was all alone in my apartment. I can't explain it, but I felt like something bad was going to happen and my heart was racing. I felt sick. Then I heard my doorbell ring once, twice, 3 times, 10 times, but I couldn't stand or walk. My whole body felt frozen. I could feel tears on my face, but I couldn't react. It felt like a nightmare to me, but I waited quietly. Since he had been following me for a while, he knew I was supposed to be at work. After a few hours, the doorbell rang again. But I was supposed to go to work now. It took all my courage, and I went out. It was him. He was crying at that moment. I wasn't scared anymore, so I decided to leave, but he followed me and grabbed my arms. When I tried to go down the stairs, I hit him and begged him to let me go. All I wanted was to get away and run as far as possible. He pushed me against the door and said, "If you won't talk to me, I'll go to your boyfriend's work. I'll talk to him, then he'll hate you as much as I love you, or maybe he'll kill me. But that doesn't matter now." I felt trapped and couldn't get away. I didn't want to call the cops because they didn't help me before, so I decided to agree to talk with him outside after my work. Surprisingly, he calmed down, thanked me, and left. When I got to work, I was still shaking. I told my coworker and boss everything, so my coworker decided to stay in his car after work in front of the restaurant so that he could help me if I needed it. At the end of my shift, Alex was there, and we sat outside talking. He kept saying the same things over and over again, and I calmly interrupted him, telling him that nothing would ever happen between us and that I was afraid of him because he was making my life miserable. It seemed like he finally realized what he was doing, but then he pulled something out of his bag, a large package, and gave it to me. It was full of expensive stuff, and I told him I didn't want to accept it at first because he said he bought it for me and couldn't keep it because it would remind him of me. He then sort of forced me by saying that if I accepted it, he wouldn't get in touch with me again, so I agreed because I was exhausted and just wanted to go home and sleep. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks later, at 5 in the morning, I was sleeping at a friend's house, one of my best friends who used to work with me, when my phone started ringing. I was too exhausted to answer, but it kept ringing, and when I opened it, I saw blood first, followed by a lengthy text that I couldn't read because more pictures appeared with blood all over them. I woke up, and my friend showed her the pictures, and I started to shake uncontrollably because I couldn't comprehend what was happening. After seeing Alex's face in the final picture of 31 mutilated arms, torsos, and legs, my friend took my phone away from me and gave me a hug. I felt terrible because I felt like I was to blame for everything, and I was even more worried after an hour went by without receiving another text or call. I thought he might have died, but then my phone rang again. On a video I received of him in a hospital bed, he was attempting to speak, but apart from a few phrases like love and promises, much of it was difficult to understand. Although I'm still impacted by it, I don't think Alex is a bad guy. Alex had attempted suicide, and the doctors diagnosed him with bipolar disorder and a personality disorder. He spent a few months at the psychiatric clinic. The last update I received about him was that he was receiving treatment and was feeling better since the day I moved to a new location, got a new job, moved to a new city, and got a new boyfriend. This occurred more than 10 years ago while I was in school. Like many students, I didn't have much money apart from my part-time work, so I took care of homes and dogs as one way to get additional money. Since I'm an animal lover, I accepted this couple's request to watch their house a few days before they returned from their trip. The person who was supposed to do it before me canceled for an unspecified reason, but they told me they would pay for 2 weeks even though I would only be staying for a week or less, so it was a good deal. The house was lovely, but it was near a neighborhood that was notoriously unsafe due to crimes like break-ins and robberies, so I wasn't too concerned because I assumed nothing bad would happen to me. The first 4 nights were fine because I was young and naive, watching movies, using the jacuzzi, and generally having a good time. The owners were supposed to return on the 5th day, so I went to check on the dog pretty late at night. However, they called me at around 10 p.m. to let me know that their flight had been delayed, so they were staying in a hotel and driving back the following morning. They asked if I could stay there again that night, and I said that I was fine. Since I still live with my parents, I contacted my dad to let him know what I was doing since I had already arrived at the home and my overnight bag was still in my vehicle. I felt exhausted and went to bed at approximately 1 a.m. I heard a window break. There was noise and what seemed like footsteps running down the hall. The first thing I did was grab my phone and press the redial button. Because of my old Motorola phone, redialing was easy. I just pressed one button. I called my dad last, hoping he would wake up if the phone rang. Then I put the phone between the headboard and mattress so that if my dad answered he could hear what was happening. I had just done that when the first guy burst through the bedroom door. I could see his silhouette in the dim light, and in his hand there was a knife glinting. When he spotted me, he raised the knife and started moving in my direction. Now, it's important for those who might not know much about South Africa and crime. Their robberies and house invasions can be really brutal, and violent people can end up getting hurt badly or even killed if they try to fight back or don't cooperate with the robbers. So without even having time to think, my instincts kicked in and I quickly lifted my legs as he approached. When he got close, I swung both legs out with all the strength I could muster. Just to give you an idea, I'm not a small person. I am 6 feet 3 inches in, and back then I weighed around 220 pounds. Staying fit and strong was a big part of my routine as I hit the gym whenever I wasn't at work or school. So when I kicked the guy, he flew and hit the wall. Thankfully, the knife he was holding went flying out of his hand. Without wasting a moment, I pounced on him, driving my right knee into his face and pushing his head against the wall. I knew my survival depended on it, so I applied extra force. The guy fell down like a heavy sack of potatoes, but before I could stand up, I heard a sound, the click of a pistol. I got really scared and couldn't move. The only thing I could think was that if he shot me, I'd rather not live with a disability or have to depend on others to take care of me. He stood there holding the pistol to my head, and it felt like a really long time, even though it was probably less than 10 seconds. I stayed still, not moving. Then he spoke in not so good English, telling me to lie face down on the bed. I got scared, but I figured if he wanted to shoot me, you would have done it already, so I followed his instructions. Then he tossed a blanket over me and I rolled into a ball against the wall so that my arms and legs could defend my body if they tried to harm me. At that moment, I forgot that I had called my father, and the first guy I had kicked was still on the ground. Then someone else came in, and they spoke a language that sounded to me like Portuguese. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I recognized the language because we used to go to Moçambique a lot for holidays, and that's the main language there. One guy tried to help the guy I kicked while the other guy started grabbing things and stuffing them into a big bag. Then around this time, I heard tires screeching and a car came really fast. The car stopped right in front of the gates, and I heard someone scream. It was my dad. The 3 guys inside the house got scared and ran out the back door trying to jump the fence, but my dad started shooting towards them. I'm sure my dad purposely didn't hit them because if he wanted to, he could. While I went inside, my dad called the police. It took them over an hour to arrive, giving some excuse about not having a vehicle available. At that point, I had calmed down a bit and began searching for the dog, but I couldn't find her anywhere, so I took a flashlight from my dad and started checking the yard. When I reached the corner, I saw her lying on the ground. When I got to her, my heart sank. She had passed away. Later examinations showed that she was poisoned. In my country, poisoning dogs is unfortunately a common thing when a house or area is targeted for a break-in or robbery. I was really angry and sad, but the police didn't seem to care much and barely paid attention. When we gave our statements, I grabbed my bag phone and tried my best to secure the house without touching anything, but the story doesn't end there. About 7 or 8 months later, the detective called me. They had caught the guys, so I needed to go to a lineup to identify them, but I told her that I didn't see their faces because it was dark, and after one of the guys held a gun to my head, so I hid under the blanket and couldn't see anything. She assured me they caught them using fingerprints and would show me the evidence beforehand. It might not be the ethically correct way, but they wanted to gather as much evidence as possible against them, and you'll understand why in a moment. I went to the police station, but it's not like in the movies. There's no one-way glass or separate room. They brought the 3 guys into the room and had them stand against the wall. The one who I later found out was the leader, the one I needed to identify, looked at me with a level of hate I had never seen before in my life. He had the eyes of someone who would harm you without hesitation. His name was Joseph Dragon. After we left the room, the detective gave me a copy of his criminal record. Among other things, I believe he was charged with 4 charges of murder and 8 or 9 counts of attempted murder. Over 100 instances of home invasions, robberies, and indecent assaults against women, as well as many assaults and aggravated attacks. The detective told me that things might have been considerably worse for me that night if I hadn't moved fast to take him down, which shocked me. When I bumped into the detective at the grocery store about 2 years later, we started talking about the case, and she revealed that he was killed during a home invasion with a pistol in hand. The owner fired a shot, hitting him in the stomach and then in the neck. Unfortunately for him, the emergency services and police were slow to respond, so he bled out on the living room floor of that person's house. 3 days later, I received another call from the detective. They warned me to be cautious because somehow he had escaped from custody and they hadn't caught him yet, but I didn't worry too much because it wasn't at my house, and I had a different car, so he probably couldn't find me. I went to an anime convention with my friends when I was 20 years old. Since my 21st birthday was only a month away, my roommate said I could have a lot of drinks as long as I stayed in our room or left with someone I trusted. I was staying in a nice hotel room with a large group of people, and I've been to a lot of conventions before, and I usually had a good time, with the exception of a few occasions when people were creepy about my cosplay or just weren't very nice to me. Later that night, when the party wasn't so much fun, I drunkenly left the room and went to explore the main lobby, where I met Steven. I'm not sure how old he was, but he seemed like an adult, perhaps a little older than me. He stated he enjoyed the manga I was holding when we ran into one other at a table with manga volumes. Since I'm more interested in anime than manga, I let him discuss the tale for a little while since he looked kind. I didn't really say much, just things like, "Yeah, that sounds cool." I thanked him for the info and then wandered around for about an hour. Eventually, I decided to go back to my room. When I got there, my roommates and I took 2 shots each and I ended up lying on the couch. That's when we heard a knock on the door and things were about to get interesting. The music and chatting hushed down like a silent rule when there's a knock, just in case it's the convention security checking in on our party. Then the friend who opened the door said, "Veronica, yeah, she's here, come on," and my friend replied. There was this moment of quiet, and then my friend called my name saying, "Hey, someone's here for you." I was curious, wondering who it could be as I made my way to the door. At that time I was pretty drunk, and there were 2 things I didn't realize. First, I never told Steven my name. Our talk lasted like 5 minutes at most, and top of that I didn't share any info. Plus my name is a bit complicated and not easy to say. Then I thought he just recognized me and my roommate, but I didn't even give him our room number. We were on higher floors in the fancy suites area. To reach our room you needed to use a different elevator than the one for regular hotel rooms, but honestly I didn't even think about that. I went to the door and Steven was there with a smile. He asked if I wanted to take a walk, and in my drunken state I said yes. I thought he was just this kind of shy anime fan who wanted someone to hang out with. So while we walked he told me about this anime where the main character was doing bad things to the girl he liked. I tried looking up that anime later on Google, but I couldn't find anything exactly like what he said except for a few yandere anime. Now I started feeling uneasy because the hallway was empty and we were just walking with no plan. Then he started talking about his favorite serial killers, how he was really into crime stuff and followed a lot of cases. That set off a big warning sign in my mind, and I thought it was time to head back to my room. But then he stopped walking and stared at me, and he said, "I know a cool place we can go. If you use the staff elevator we can go to the very top of the hotel. It's really pretty." That made me a bit nervous, but he seemed so sure about it. All of a sudden he started breathing weird and his hands were shaking. I told him no because I still had some sense left in my head. Then he grabbed my arm really hard and tried to pull me towards the staff doors. I pulled back telling him to stop, but he said to be quiet. I managed to break free from him and started running. He chased after me telling me to stop. I was almost crying and wondering why the hallway were so empty. Finally, I ran into a group of girls. They could see the fear on my face. and quickly pulled me into their group asking about my hair and makeup while putting their arms around me. I was crying and told them what happened. When I looked back, Steven was gone. I didn't see him for the rest of the convention, but because of him I stopped being so friendly at con. Just so you know, I called him Steven, but I never got his real name. I told the convention security about him, and my roommates and friends stuck with me using the buddy system for the rest of the event. Honestly, I truly believed, based on what he said and how he acted when I tried to get away, that he planned to take me to that nice view and do something really bad. I went to an anime convention with my friends when I was 20 years old. Since my 21st birthday was only a month away, my roommate said I could have a lot of drinks as long as I stayed in our room or left with someone I trusted. I was staying in a nice hotel room with a large group of people, and I've been to a lot of conventions before, and I usually had a good time, with the exception of a few occasions when people were creepy about my cosplay or just weren't very nice to me. Later that night, when the party wasn't so much fun, I drunkenly left the room and went to explore the main lobby, where I met Steven. I'm not sure how old he was, but he seemed like an adult, perhaps a little older than me. He stated he enjoyed the manga I was holding when we ran into one other at a table with manga volumes. Since I'm more interested in anime than manga, I let him discuss the tale for a little while since he looked kind. I didn't really say much, just things like, "Yeah, that sounds cool." I thanked him for the info and then wandered around for about an hour. Eventually, I decided to go back to my room. When I got there, my roommates and I took 2 shots each and I ended up lying on the couch. That's when we heard a knock on the door and things were about to get interesting. The music and chatting hushed down like a silent rule when there's a knock, just in case it's the convention security checking in on our party. Then the friend who opened the door said, "Veronica, yeah, she's here, come on," and my friend replied. There was this moment of quiet, and then my friend called my name saying, "Hey, someone's here for you." I was curious, wondering who it could be as I made my way to the door. At that time I was pretty drunk, and there were 2 things I didn't realize. First, I never told Steven my name. Our talk lasted like 5 minutes at most, and top of that I didn't share any info. Plus, my name is a bit complicated and not easy to say. Then I thought he just recognized me and my roommate, but I didn't even give him our room number. We were on higher floors in the fancy suites area. To reach our room, you needed to use a different elevator than the one for regular hotel rooms, but honestly, I didn't even think about that. I went to the door and Steven was there with a smile. He asked if I wanted to take a walk, and in my drunken state I said yes. I thought he was just this kind of shy anime fan who wanted someone to hang out with. So while we walked, he told me about this anime where the main character was doing bad things to the girl he liked. I tried looking up that anime later on Google, but I couldn't find anything exactly like what he said except for a few yandere anime. Now I started feeling uneasy because the hallway was empty and we were just walking with no plan. Then he started talking about his favorite serial killers, how he was really into crime stuff and followed a lot of cases. That set off a big warning sign in my mind, and I thought it was time to head back to my room. But then he stopped walking and stared at me, and he said, "I know a cool place we can go. If you use the staff elevator, we can go to the very top of the hotel. It's really pretty." That made me a bit nervous, but he seemed so sure about it. All of a sudden he started breathing weird and his hands were shaking. I told him no because I still had some sense left in my head. Then he grabbed my arm really hard and tried to pull me towards the staff doors. I pulled back, telling him to stop, but he said to be quiet. I managed to break free from him and started running. He chased after me, telling me to stop. I was almost crying and wondering why the hallway were so empty. Finally, I ran into a group of girls. They could see the fear on my face. and quickly pulled me into their group asking about my hair and makeup while putting their arms around me. I was crying and told them what happened. When I looked back, Steven was gone. I didn't see him for the rest of the convention, but because of him I stopped being so friendly at con. Just so you know, I called him Steven, but I never got his real name. I told the convention security about him, and my roommates and friends stuck with me using the buddy system for the rest of the event. Honestly, I truly believed, based on what he said and how he acted when I tried to get away, that he planned to take me to that nice view and do something really bad. I kicked his forearm to make him release me. I kept kicking and shaking the other leg too. Luckily, I got free, but I couldn't turn around, so I started climbing, scared he might follow me into the house, and who knows what he might do if he got inside. I just wanted to kick him, hoping he'd lose balance and fall off the stairs so I could get inside my house. I kicked and kicked, screaming, but it didn't work. It felt like a long time, but it was probably about 5 seconds, and then I heard the door of the old lady downstairs start to open. Happy heard it too, so he ran away. He passed by her house, but she saw him. Then she called my name and asked if I was okay. She stuck her head up from the bottom of the stairs, still calling my name, but all I could do was cry in fear and pain. My elbow was bleeding. She asked me to come into her house so she could help with my bleeding. I said it was okay and I would take care of it myself, but she insisted and kept calling me to come down. Eventually, I ignored her, climbed the stairs with difficulty, and got inside. After about an hour, I cleaned up, felt a bit calmer, and cautiously went to the old lady's house. I knocked and she opened the door. I asked her not to tell my parents anything because if my dad knew, he might really hurt the guy. I explained that Happy was just not right in the head and my dad shouldn't go to jail for someone who's not thinking clearly. She promised not to tell my family, and that was the end of it. Over the next 2 years he changed again, but this time he wouldn't even look me in the eyes. I would be walking and he was walking towards me, but he would turn around and go another way. For the first few months, I was afraid that he may be lurking around a corner or something, but it turned out that he just didn't want to be seen by me. Even after I moved out, he still avoids me whenever I visit, and that hasn't changed in 4 years. More than everything, I hope that mental illness is more widely recognized in our nation and that individuals like him may get the proper therapy and therapies. I also hope that Happy remains calm and doesn't hurt any other females in our area.